Today we have two eminent panelists to speak on the issue. Ms. Maja Daruwalla is a board member of the CHRI and has been also a consultant with the Tata Trust. She has worked as the executive director of the CHRI for several years. She has been the pioneer on the issue of prison reforms in the country. Also, she has been part of several committees on the issue and also initiated the prison visitors program where outside NGOs and individuals could access the prisons for the first time. She was one of the petitioners in the Romila Thapar case regarding the setting up of the SIT for investigating into the Bhima Koregaon arrests. No debate or discourse can be possible without hearing Ms. Daruwalla on this issue. And she has been an inspiration for all of us who have tried to work on some of the issues relating to the prisons.
I must apologize also to the many people I see who are already aficionados and hard workers in the area of prisons, because they may find some of the stuff that I am saying quite basic. But I wanted to start with the basics so that we get the bigger picture. I see that there are almost 100 participants, and perhaps some of it is unfamiliar with them. First of all, I want to start with some of the myths that commonly allow society to keep on ignoring what is happening in prisons and scorning those who land up there. The first myth is that all people in prison are rightfully there. They have done something dreadful and deserve whatever misery, deprivation, ill health, and violence that they face. The second myth is that once inside, the inmates have absolutely no rights and they should put up with all that is happening around them, however cruel it may be, however unsafe it may be, because they don't deserve better, so they should just shut up and sit down. The third myth is we, fortunate people on the outside, have got no connection with the wretched lot that is in prisons, and so we can ignore them at will. However, I feel that society is wrong on all these counts, and it must educate itself to understand the correlationship between prisons and society, as well as understand the nature of the people who are there and understand who actually occupies prisons. So that's why I was saying it's basic, in the sense that the recent PSI prison statistics in India is out, and here's what you see. Still, 70% of all the inmates there are under trials. Only 30% or thereabouts are, I'm rounding off these figures, so please don't hold me to exact percentages per point. There are 70% of all inmates are under trials. There are about 1,400 big and small prisons and jails in the country. They house about 4.7 lakh prisoners. 70% of these are people who are awaiting inquiries into what has happened, investigations, or cases are in process of being tried and they haven't been able to get bail, or they are in for some other reason. I would hazard that 90% of all these, now I can't quote you a study on this, but I would say that a large percentage, a huge percentage of them are marginally disadvantaged people, socially deprived people, way disproportionately people from minority communities. So the majority are also in for petty crimes. Not a large percentage of people are in for really violent crimes, armed robbery, kidnapping, terrorism, etc. And each of them, just like you and I, would expect, if we were suspect or accused, are innocent until proven guilty. And that can only happen after a trial. So I just want to emphasize this because, as you may remember, this is a constitution-governed, rule of law country, and that is the law. The only sanction, the second thing I want to say and I want to emphasize, is that the only punishment that is allowed by law is to put you away if you have done something wrong and have been found guilty. That is the punishment. You don't go to prison to be punished further. You don't go to prison to be hurt, to be harmed, to be put in danger. And I think that society must start to recognize this. It follows then that outside of the freedom of movement, which is curtailed, and reasonable restrictions that the disciplines of the prison environment force on prisoners, we remain with our rights and liberties, civil liberties, intact. I think that judges, especially those in the original jurisdictions, sometimes do forget this and feel that whatever is happening in prison does not require their jurisprudential eye on it or their careful eye on it, because somehow it is deserved and they are actually doing a favor to those who are undeserving. Now, the law, on the other hand, relating to prisons and prisoners is drawn from all sorts of sources, and all of them point to and take you in the direction of saying that prisoners have their fullest civil liberties available, and in fact have more than that, because they are vulnerable, because they are sequestered. There is particular attention to be paid to the conditions and to the rights that they enjoy. So you get these from the international standards, like the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, on the minimum standards, the standard minimum rules on the treatment of prisoners. At home, you have, of course, the very modern 126-year Prison Act of 1894. It's an absurd thing that we have not we have not radically changed it, but here we are. There is that act, and now you also have the modern prison rules, which is being adopted, of 2015, which is being adopted by the states, because prisons are a state subject. All in all, the canon remains that inmates do not become non-persons, have their human rights intact, and are not to be subjected to aggravated forms of suffering over and above incarceration. Which means that the state has a duty of care. It puts upon the state a duty of care. What this duty of care includes ensuring the safety from harm, physical and mental, and also the state has to provide opportunities for equal access to justice and actual access to justice. Amongst other things, the right to have access to a lawyer, get legal aid, have due process, have speedy trial, even to seek his remedies against jail authorities if there has been an infraction within the jail or unfair treatment. The prisoner is allowed and not deprived of his remedies. The court has said there must be corrective legal procedure, fair and reasonable and effective. Being deprived of his right to mount a defense, to be given timely justice, to be left uninformed about his family and his family about him, that is not part of the deal. The right to live with dignity, the court has said again and again, does not go away with being in prison. Being put to unreasonable risk of contracting a deadly disease is not a part of the deal. Being uninformed about your family and your family about the person inside is also not part of the deal. So in reality, do these standards get translated? The environment in prison, though the courts have repeatedly enunciated the duty of the state, the environment within the prison makes it impossible to give all of these rights or to ensure that none of these rights are violated. Now, I am not saying that to excuse the prison administration or the oversight bodies. I am merely saying that the reality is that it does not. But let's look at how much they are overstaffed, understaffed, and over-resourced. Across the nation, on average, I'm not giving you state-wise, I'm working some of the averages out, and approximately this is the big picture. Occupancy rates from 2006 to 2019 have increased from about 114 to 119. This is just before the COVID. I don't think the fact that there's been decongestion, etc., is going to actually have so much difference on occupancy rates. Now, these are average occupancy rates. In places like UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, they are much higher. If you look at individual prisons and sub jails and certain places, you will find that they're even higher. So with occupancy, over occupancy comes increased risk. How much increased risk is the state going to say that they are going to be liable for? We already know that even in the best of times, prisons are a hellhole for health. Malaria, skin disease, stomach disease, TB, HIV, already there. Death rates double the ordinary population, is what the WHO says. Now, okay, so we've got this huge occupancy rate. Now, perhaps we may not have enough room, but surely we have enough staff to take care of all this. Total vacancies, if averaged out across all levels of prison staff, taken together in the country, stand at 70%. This is up from 65% in 2016. Now, COVID has taken a toll of the staff, and a bad toll of the staff. The staff, in many ways, are as much at risk, and because they come in and out, many people in their families, etc., are taking on risks they never wanted and they should not have to bear. Little children, young wives, pregnant people should not have to have this hazard when they are working, but they do. But the data in real time, as you mentioned, is difficult to get at. And this is a very important point, that this data should be up on a daily or weekly basis, simply because without data, you are never going to get a remedy. So what you are doing is you are violating every standard that has been laid down, making excuses for it, and not giving yourself the equipment to right it before there is more death, before there is more tragedy, before there is more harm. At the same time now, you've got staff too little, places too little, though some decongestion has taken place because now there are designated places outside of normal prisons which are now created so that they can decongest prisons. But because they are not prisons, because they are not created to be prisons, because they are ad hoc, they are sometimes even worse in terms of conditions and standards. And you read those reports all the time, so that I won't press on that point. But you have to consider what is taking place in terms of planning and who is responsible for that. If people are not going to be ever made responsible, this is going to continue. If COVID continues for 3 years, you're going to continue like this for 3 years. This is the big problem. So what has happened since 2016 to 2019 in terms of total prison population? Total prison population has gone up from 4.3 to 4.7 lakh people. Now, immediately I say that, somebody will come along, somebody from officialdom will come along and say, yes, 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 but considering the large population we have, our population is very low. Our prison population is very low. that is neither here nor there. The people who are in prison are the ones who are in danger. So women who are kind of under 10%-ish have gone up to 13%. Now, I haven't in this talk that I'm giving paid particular attention to women or to other people who have further vulnerabilities. They may be from the gay community, they may be transgenders, they may be people who are extremely sick. So all of these are to be taken care of in a sort of segmented way. And how much this is being done and how much capacity there is to do this is the question. Now, despite the Supreme Court declaring that the administrative regulations must allow for free access to lawyers and frequent family visits, and have actually said that if your regulations don't follow what we are saying, then you are in dereliction of these standards, the shutdown has created a situation where there is virtually no access to lawyers, or so intermittent that you are completely ruining the possibility of representation and fair trial and the mounting of a defense, or even going forward and asking for a speedy trial or explaining the situation of remand. Now, that we will go into that a little bit later. I'm sure that other people will advert to it, and Mihir certainly in his explanation about the Maharashtra situation will be actually presenting what is typical across the country. Now, doctors, in this moment of fear and frustration and being completely vulnerable and sequestered in a place, it is vital to have doctors. Let's look at a reality check. There is a pandemic raging outside and there is heightened risk inside. Now, here's the ground truth. There are about 10.4 lakh registered allopathic doctors across the country. There are many more veds and these people who practice alternate medicine and home remedy type people and those magic people. But allopathic doctors, there are about 10 lakhs. At any given time, because of their other preoccupations, they come down to about 8 lakhs. Then where are they? They are all, a majority of them are in cities. And just below 50% of them are to be found in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. The world average of doctors is 150 doctors for 100,000 population. India has between 86 to 64. Again, these are averages. They don't talk about what it might be like in a small village in Orissa or in a small town in Orissa. So how are you going to get the kind of prison care and health care that you require? The standards say, the new model code says that there should be one doctor for every 300 prisoners. In smaller places, there must be visiting doctors. In each state has sanctioned medical strength, but the actual strength on the ground shows that there are huge vacancies, and all of this can be seen in the 2019 November launched India Justice Report, which there will be another version of it, another edition of it at the end of the year probably. But all of this information which will help you to advocate for your cause is there. But between 2016 statistics in the prison statistics of India, while the average vacancy of medical staff, which means technicians and pharmacists, etc., the average vacancy has increased from 35 to 41%. But the medical officers, which means doctors and specialists and that, has fallen a little bit, has fallen 3% from 37 to, from 40% to 37. Now, it is your guess and mine how often they come, how effective they are, whether they match the diseases that are there. And we are discounting now and not talking about, sorry, I should say at least only one state in the whole country has got no vacancies of medical staff, and that is Kerala. Everywhere else they range from the average that I told you to something like 75 and 80% in places like Jharkhand and West Bengal. Now that is not even counting the other stuff that you need to look after people, which is ambulances, medical, well-stocked medicines, all of women doctors, transportation, all of that. Whether you have connections to the local primary healthcare, etc. Have these arrangements been made? Are they in practice? Have they saved lives? Now, one thing we have to remember that we often talk about COVID as being the problem, but it is really the lockdown that has caused much more problem than there need have been. That is in my view. And also that though COVID has highlighted some of these for all of us who work in these sectors, these things existed a long time. You said that I was one of the people who had been working for a long time, certainly not a pioneer, but working for a long time in this area. And we know that this has existed for decades. All of these problems have existed for decades. But the two things that after COVID and the lockdown, several diktats were put in place. And this was fundamental to the safety. Fundamental thoughts uppermost in the minds of policymakers was that we must have safety, we must have safe distancing, physical distancing is going to do it, masks, testing and all that, yes, but physical distances is what going to be doing it. So therefore we must have diktats. Two things entirely antithetical to each other happened in the case of prisons. One was that we must decongest at all costs. And the other one was, well, we'll close down the courts. So the very agency that could have helped with a reasoned decongestion, while it functioned to ensure that people were not brought in, because decongestion is about not bringing people in the first instance, and making sure that people who deserve to get out because they are vulnerable. But then you saw what happened with the decongestion. The Supreme Court, as early as March, set up these high-powered committees. The high-powered committees had a criteria. The criteria which was suggested, but that became the sort of ironclad reason for criteria for letting out people. That privileged things like the time spent in prison, the nature of the offense, the safety, perfectly reasonable, the safety of the public if you came out. But the primary reason for the decongestion, which was the vulnerability of the person inside, became a secondary thing. And it is only now beginning to percolate into the consciousness of releases. At the same time, while they said that, yes, these high-powered committees said you can be released, they said, well, if you want to be on parole, if you want to be released on bail, you have to go to the courts. Now, the courts were not functioning. So the already lengthy bail procedures, you have to find courts, you have to find lawyers, you have to find sureties, you have to give assurances, and all of this in a non-functional environment. So we didn't get very far on that, and the Maharashtra example shows that. Now, so the numbers in custody remain high. Surely the 5-month-long lockdown and the non-working of the courts is going to cause a jam. It's going to cause a log jam where there is already a log jam. There are 23 million 23 million criminal cases pending. I could go into how long they have been pending for. Sure, not 23 million people are in jail, so that means a lot of people are already out on bail, etc. But how is that satisfactory? There are probably way too many people out who should have been adjudicated, probably may be found guilty, and who are roaming around in society. On the other hand, there are plenty of people who should have been adjudicated, who are probably innocent and are sitting in jail. So the third, I would like to get back to the people are posing the video conferencing and technology as being the magic bullet that will sort all this out. But we are seeing only 60% of all jails have got VCs. Now, when we say that, we are not saying bravo. What we are saying is 60% say they have VCs, but we don't know whether the VCs are connected, whether they are working, whether they are technicians that do this, whether they work 24/7, and what they are used for. Are they used only for remand? Are they used to connect people to their families? Are they used to connect people to their lawyers? We don't know. So that is another problem. The other myth that I spoke about is that there are these 4,70,000 people in jail and they have very little to do with us. But the turnover of people coming in and out of jail is near 1 million. So they are coming in contact with high risk environments and coming out into the population. The jails are now full of people who are seeing their minimal rights being stamped upon. They are sequestered, they are frustrated, they are fearful, and in countries like Romania, Jordan, Colombia, we are seeing large-scale jail riots happening. So, and we are also seeing, and there is research on this, though that research is not in India, which is a great pity, is that places in the locality of jails are also becoming high, those communities are becoming high risks. So with all of that going on, prisons are what we are talking about today, but the violation of civil liberties is taking place somewhere else, and the result of it is imprisonment. You have, and while this goes on, you are not going to get any change in either the health or the actual population numbers in population or the injustices. So here are some areas where remedies, where reform could take place. There are false and unnecessary arrests, and arrests are actions of first recourse when they should be actions of last recourse. Torture in police stations happens every day. It goes unchecked. There is impunity. We complain, we complain, we complain. You have got some of the most important advocates for who are talking about torture on your screens today, but nothing has moved. The difficulty of finding immediate and effective representation with legal aid, how it works, how it could work. We need more paralegals in jails. We need more paramedics in jails. Now, this could be done easily. It doesn't take rocket science to do this. It could be done even now as an immediate and even as an intermediate measure. The poverty of forensics, the vacancies and the corruption of money and motive all down the line across all of the subsystems. I would point out, am I now having spoken to you at length about this, am I now optimistic that prison reform or reform of the general justice system is going to take place? I would love to say yes. It has become fashionable for people to say that this COVID offers both an opportunity as well as challenges. There are opportunities and any fool can see them. But is there the will? Is there the capacity? I don't see it. I see a huge gap between standards and implementation. The implementation is certainly in part hampered by the capacities, lack of money, but there is also the lack of imagination and empathy that is not coming because these people are seen as rubbish in a rubbish dump. Now, big reforms have always been in the pipeline. And what I see as what I see is one of the great failures, beyond the failure, one of the great failures is of the guardian institutions. We forget that in this country, we have the police complaints authorities, we have the human rights commissions. Do you know that we have over 170 human rights commissions that are either thematic or issue-based to do with populations? And these are all people who are given these posts, paid by taxpayers, and yet we have not heard anything about them. All of these are accountable for what is happening to ordinary people in prison. And to my mind, one of the immediate actions that must take place is the opening up of courts. The courts must open up. It is not beyond practicality, it is not beyond imagination that courtrooms and all of the places that people go to get justice, like the legal aid clinics, etc., can be made safe, can be made sensibly have physical distancing. Lawyers can come back to courts. Presentations can be made in courts. This heavy reliance on a broken technology, half-baked system is just honestly just lies, and we cannot keep on with this. And so the courts must work double time to repair the damage. This is owed to each one of us, because today I may be outside, tomorrow I may be inside, and we have to remember that. It's not about somebody else. And the civil liberties that are lost, destroyed, ignored in jails also means that they are lost, ignored, and demeaned and diminished outside. So in my view, the delivery of justice is an essential service and should be declared so. And nothing should be done to diminish it. The damage that has already been done because of lack of imagination and empathy has to be paid for. It is a debt that is owed to the public, and the state must do everything to repair it. Thank you. I'm sorry to have spoken for too long.
No. It was great. Thank you, Ms. Daruwalla. Also pointing out much more glaring problems and issues that exist with the prison system right now. Just to point out, like, the courts also in Bombay are not functioning, a city which thrives on technology, and the High Court is barely functioning with a few benches hearing matters every day. The other day we heard relatives of prisoners from the Bhima Koregaon matter and the lawyers also saying that they were not being able to get any kind of information from the jail, not being able to speak to the prisoner, or that they are not being able to speak to the lawyers. So these are the issues, and court certainly has not performed its function to the optimum, which should have been in these times.